53 got breaking news. We're going out to California right now, where authorities are holding a briefing on the mass shooting overnight in Thousand Oaks.
Also on my right is L.D. Maples. He's the chief of the Coastal Division of the California Highway Patrol. First name is spelled L.D., last name Maples, M-A-P-L-E-S. So right now I'm going to hand it over to Sheriff Dean to give you the latest.
Good morning. You're all experienced reporters, and you understand this is dynamic, ongoing investigation and a tragic situation. So I'll go through the details. I'll share with you everything I have, and we'll answer all the questions you may have. Our partners from the FBI and the Highway Patrol will also answer any additional questions you might have. Tonight at 11:20 p.m., Sheriff's 911 received multiple calls of shots being fired at the Borderline Bar and Grill in Thousand Oaks. Our first sheriff's unit arrived on scene. 3 minutes later, there was also 2 Highway Patrol officers on scene who had been on a local traffic stop and heard the traffic and responded right away. Approximately 3 minutes later, a Highway Patrol officer and a sheriff's sergeant made entry into the Borderline because they heard shots being fired and felt there might be additional victims inside. Upon going through the front door, the sheriff's sergeant was struck multiple times with gunfire. The Highway Patrol officer stepped back and secured the perimeter until additional units arrived, and he rescued the sheriff's sergeant out of the line of gunfire. When additional units arrived, including SWAT personnel, agencies from the Oxnard Police Department, the Simi Valley Police Department, the Ventura Police Department, and additional officers from the Highway Patrol, they made entry into the Borderline Bar and Grill. They found 11 victims that had been killed. The suspect, who we believe was the only suspect, was dead inside. And there were multiple other victims of different levels of injury inside that were rescued from the scene and taken to local hospitals. In addition to the victims inside, and the numbers are upwards of 10 to 12, additional victims with minor injuries fled the scene on their own and took themselves to local hospitals. We have not identified the suspect yet. Our partners from the FBI were on scene almost immediately to help us with the identification process and with crime scene processing. We have no idea if there is a terrorism link to this event or not. As you know, these are ongoing investigations, and that information will come out as soon as we're able to determine exactly who the suspect was and what motive he might have had for this horrific event. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. Well, the Sergeant Hillis died at the the sergeant passed away at the hospital about an hour ago. I only mentioned it might be terrorists because that's where we all go these days when we have multiple shootings like this. There's no reason for it, and we have this horrific death. I have nothing to lead me to believe, or the FBI, that there is any terrorism link here, but we certainly will look at that option. I'm sorry? What do you mean by devices? There's some initial reports that a smoke bomb might have been used. We have not found anything yet. We have called in our bomb team to go in through, and we have a couple bomb dogs here that are checking the area, but we haven't found any other explosive device or confirmation that there was a smoke device.
What does that make you think if there was a smoke device?
Well, hindsight and speculation is pretty easy. You would think if someone throws a smoke device that it was certainly more of a planned attack and not something spontaneous.
How long was he on the floor setting
Sergeant Hillis was on the force for 29 years, was looking to retire in the next year or so. He was a Moore Park resident and is survived by his wife and his son. Ron Hillis, H-E-L-U-S. Well, the question is, Thousand Oaks is a safe community. What do I make of this? I make it that it's a horrific incident. It's part of the horrors that are happening in our country and everywhere. And I think it's impossible to put any logic or any sense to the senseless.
How did the suspect die? Yeah.
When the officers made entry, the suspect was already deceased. There were 11 victims. I will not count the suspect as a victim, the suspect, and then Sergeant Hillis.
So 11 victims.
11 victims, the suspect.
That's the Ventura County Sheriff Jeffrey Dean confirming 11 victims killed inside the Borderline Bar and Grill in Thousand Oaks, California, in a shooting overnight, including a sheriff's sergeant who was one of the first 2 law enforcement officials to go inside the building. He said when that sheriff's sergeant and another law enforcement officer, state highway patrol trooper, approached the bar and grill, they went inside, and immediately that sergeant was shot several times. Let's go back out and listen to the sheriff. No, still no audio with that.
Do you know if the suspect had visited this
There we go.
bar before? Has anybody said it?
We don't know anything about the suspect. We haven't talked to anybody that had any contact with him prior.
Do you know if he lived here?
Well, I actually have no idea who he is. We don't know anything about him yet.
Talking about active shooter training, the ages of the victims, can you tell us if they were young?
I actually don't know what the ages were. It is a nightclub, so I would, speculate they were probably in the 21 to 26-year-old age group.
Can you talk about if active shooter training played a role in the sergeant, going in and trying to confront the suspect immediately?
There's no doubt that the change in how we handle active shooters played a role. Sergeant Hillis and the highway patrol officer first on scene, they knew they had to take action, and they went in and did what they had to do. Yes, 13. We don't know how many are injured because they went to separate hospitals. I'm going to speculate, given what I've heard, somewhere between 10 and 15 additional injuries. And we don't know, we don't believe there might be one additional gunshot victim, but we think there are other injuries, people trying to escape, breaking out windows, and doing different things.
When you see these shootings happen across the country, did you ever think that it would happen right here?
I've been a cop for 41 years, and I never thought I would see the things around the country that would happen, but I've learned it doesn't matter what community you're in, it doesn't matter how safe your community is, it can happen anywhere. Because obviously for someone to do this, they have to have some sort of mental illness, and sadly we have people with mental illness all over the country.
Sheriff, were there any threats to anybody in the bar, any kind of indication something like this could happen?
We have actually no information about that at all. But again, we're very early on in the investigation.
Do you know what happened? We heard that he went inside, shot the security guard, and then kind of went in and started shooting. Is that what happened, or could you walk us through?
We actually don't know. I mean, we're interviewing multiple witnesses, but I can say no, but we haven't got everybody together yet to really put that timeline together, and we'll certainly provide that as soon as we can get something. It's so tragic, and losing Ron, we go to the gym together, work out together, is horrific and terrible, and it saddens our heart. But there's also parents of those 11 other victims in there whose hearts are ripped out tonight. And I know there's parents wondering, oh my gosh, what was one of my children in there, or was it my sister or my brother? So there's just no way to describe this. It saddens us all, and it tears at our hearts and emotions, as it should. And if we ever get to the point where it doesn't, then there's something wrong with us.
Sheriff, can you talk about after Parkland, there was a lot of questions about police not being active enough, and it does sound like your sergeant really was proactive. What was the thought process in the department after Parkland? How have things changed?
Actually, it changed for us after Columbine, years and years ago, and we trained with our fire department for active shooting, and our officers know when you get to a scene and there's two of you, or even just one of you, and there's shooting going on, you go in. And that's a change of philosophy of what it used to be. And we worked so well in our county. The Highway Patrol was here. When they made entry the second time the night, there were Simi Valley officers, there were Oxnard officers, there were Ventura officers, there were sheriff's deputies, and there were Highway Patrol officers. Everyone comes together to solve the problem.
And just a clarification of the time from the moment that the first contact was made by police to the moment that the second contact was made by police, what was the time frame?
So the time frame, so the first deputies arrived on scene at 11:22. They made entry approximately 4 minutes later. That's when Sergeant Hillis was shot.
Ventura County Sheriff Jeff Dean going over the tragic details of shooting. It happened overnight inside of a bar in Thousand Oaks, California. The totals as of right now, the numbers, as you know, in these active shooter situations, these numbers change and they're awfully fluid. But at this point, he says 12 victims are dead. The shooter is dead. And among those dead is one of his sergeants.
Yeah, it happened at the Borderline Bar and Grill in Thousand Oaks, California. They arrived at the scene there at about 11:22. Sergeant Ron Helios is the first one who entered that bar and grill, and tragically he was shot and died sometime later at the hospital. You heard the officer get emotional during the press conference reporting that sadly that Sergeant Ron Helios has passed away. Again, 11 victims dead, and also an officer.
12 victims and then one.
11 victims, including and also the officer and the gunman dead. 13 people dead total. Dead this morning after a mass shooting at Borderline Bar and Grill in Thousand Oaks. He also said that multiple people have been transported to the hospital. Others who left the scene earlier before they arrived also wounded and are arriving at area hospitals there. He also mentioned that a smoke device was used during this mass shooting. And of course, they're investigating, trying to uncover exactly what took place there. But we do know this morning that the gunman is dead, and sadly, an officer is also dead this morning, and also 11 victims. So we have 12 people dead and the gunman dead this morning there in Thousand Oaks, California. Certainly a sad, sad, tragic event taking place there in California this morning. We'll continue to monitor this breaking news situation taking place in Thousand Oaks this morning, throughout the morning on News 2 Today, and of course our social media platforms on our website, counton2.com.